You're about to step onto the stage for a big presentation, or maybe you're sitting in front of your laptop, hesitating to hit send on that email that could change everything. Your stomach churns, your mind races, and that familiar voice whispers, "What if I'm not good enough?" We've all been there, paralyzed by self-doubt, questioning our abilities, and letting fear take the wheel. But what if I told you there's a way to silence that voice, not by fighting it, but by understanding it? Enter Marcus Aurelius, one of history's greatest Stoic philosophers, who once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. In this video, we'll dive deep into Stoic wisdom to uncover practical tools you can use to combat self-doubt in your everyday life. We'll explore how to focus on what's within your control, how to cultivate self-awareness, and how to build unshakable confidence by aligning your thoughts with reality. Whether you're facing a high-stakes moment or just struggling with that nagging inner critic, these timeless principles can help you reclaim your power and move forward with clarity and purpose. So let's get started, because the journey to silencing self-doubt begins with a single step. Self-doubt has a way of creeping in when we fixate on things outside our grasp, whether it's the approval of others, the outcome of a project, or even the unpredictable twists of life. But here's the truth: much of what we worry about isn't actually within our control. This is where Stoic wisdom offers a lifeline through a principle known as the dichotomy of control. At its core, this idea is simple yet profound. Some things are within our power and others are not. The key to quieting self-doubt lies in understanding the difference. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it this way: "Some things are within our power while others are not." Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. In other words, we can't control external events, but we can control how we respond to them. Our thoughts, our decisions, and our efforts, these are the things we truly own. Everything else, it's just noise. Let's bring this to life with an example. Imagine someone preparing for a job interview. They've done their research, practiced their answers, and polished their resume. But as the day approaches, self-doubt starts to take hold. What if I don't get the job? What if they don't like me? Here's the shift. Instead of worrying about the outcome, they focus on what's within their control: their preparation, their attitude, and their effort. They remind themselves that the interviewer's decision is out of their hands, but showing up as their best self is entirely within their power. This shift in focus doesn't just reduce anxiety, it builds confidence. So what about you? Take a moment to reflect on what's been weighing on your mind lately. Is it something you can control, or is it an external outcome? If it's the latter, consider redirecting your energy toward what you can influence: your mindset, your actions, your effort. When you focus on what's within your power, self-doubt loses its grip and you reclaim your sense of agency. This isn't about ignoring challenges, it's about understanding where your power truly lies, and that's the first step toward silencing self-doubt for good. Do you truly know why you doubt yourself? It's a question worth sitting with for a moment, because self-doubt often thrives in the shadows of our mind, unchallenged and unexplored. The Stoics believed that the first step to silencing that nagging voice of doubt is to shine a light on it, to understand where it comes from. This is where the power of self-awareness comes into play. One of the most powerful tools the Stoics used for this was self-examination, often through journaling. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, wrote extensively about the importance of reflecting on your thoughts and actions. In his letters, he encouraged his readers to regularly ask themselves, "What am I afraid of? Why do I feel this way? What's really at the root of my doubt?" By putting these questions to paper, you create a space to confront your fears head-on, rather than letting them swirl endlessly in your mind. Take, for example, a modern professional who feels stuck in their career. They might journal about their recurring fear of failure, only to realize that it's not the fear of failing itself that holds them back. It's the deeper fear of what others might think. This kind of clarity is transformative. It shifts the focus from the surface-level doubt to the underlying cause, giving you something concrete to work with. So here's a challenge for you. Grab a pen and paper or open a note on your phone and write down one recurring doubt that's been on your mind. Then ask yourself, where does this come from? Is it tied to a past experience, a fear of judgment, or something else entirely? This simple act of self-examination can be the first step toward reclaiming your confidence. Remember, the goal isn't to judge yourself, it's to understand yourself, and understanding is the foundation of growth. Stoicism teaches us that self-awareness isn't just about knowing your doubts, it's about knowing yourself. And when you know yourself, you hold the key to moving beyond the limitations that self-doubt tries to impose. Even Marcus Aurelius, one of the most respected Stoic philosophers and Roman emperors, wasn't immune to self-doubt or imperfection. In his private writings, now known as meditations, he often reflected on his own shortcomings, reminding himself to stay humble and grounded. He wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion." There is never any need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control. This wasn't just advice for others, it was a personal reminder to accept his flaws and focus on what he could improve. This is a cornerstone of Stoic wisdom, the idea that imperfection isn't something to fear or hide, it's a natural part of being human. Seneca once said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." In other words, our fear of failure or judgment is often worse than the mistakes themselves. Stoicism teaches us to see our flaws not as weaknesses, but as opportunities for growth. Every misstep, every moment of self-doubt is a chance to learn, adapt, and become stronger. Think about someone you admire, maybe a friend, a mentor, or even a public figure. Chances are they've faced their own struggles and imperfections, but they didn't let those define them. Instead, they used those experiences to grow. For example, imagine a musician who doubted their ability to perform in front of an audience. Instead of letting that fear paralyze them, they embraced their vulnerability, practiced relentlessly, and eventually turned what felt like a weakness into a strength. Their imperfections became the foundation for their success. So, what about you? What flaws or insecurities do you carry? Maybe you're too hard on yourself when you make a mistake, or perhaps you feel like you're not good enough compared to others. What if, instead of seeing these as shortcomings, you viewed them as opportunities? What if your so-called flaws were actually hidden strengths waiting to be unlocked? Stoicism invites us to shift our perspective, to stop fighting against our imperfections and start embracing them as part of our journey toward growth and self-mastery. What if your worst fears came true? It's a question that might send a shiver down your spine, but for the Stoics, it was a powerful tool for building resilience and silencing self-doubt. This ancient practice, known as premeditatio malorum, or negative visualization, wasn't about dwelling on the negative or feeding fear. Instead, it was a way to prepare mentally for life's uncertainties, to face them head-on, and to realize that even in our darkest moments, we have the capacity to endure and adapt. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This simple yet profound idea lies at the heart of negative visualization. By imagining the worst-case scenario, you're not inviting disaster, you're training your mind to respond with clarity and strength. Think of it like a fire drill. You don't practice because you expect a fire, you practice so that if one ever happens, you know exactly what to do. Take the example of an athlete preparing for a big competition. They don't just visualize winning, they also imagine stumbling, falling, or making mistakes. Why? Because by confronting these possibilities, they strip fear of its power. They learn to recover, to keep moving forward no matter what happens. It's this kind of mental preparation that builds unshakable resilience, not just in sports, but in life. So, what's your worst-case scenario? What's the thing that keeps you up at night, the fear that whispers doubts into your mind? What if it actually happened? How would you handle it? The Stoics believed that by asking these questions, you're not inviting failure, you're preparing for it. And in that preparation, you find a quiet confidence, a sense of control that no amount of self-doubt can shake. Negative visualization isn't about pessimism, it's about empowerment. It's about realizing that even in the face of adversity, you have the tools to navigate it. And once you've faced your fears in your mind, they lose their grip on you in reality. So take a moment, close your eyes, imagine the worst, and then ask yourself, what would I do next? The answer might just surprise you. Resilience is a skill, not a trait. Think of it like a muscle, it grows stronger the more you use it. Stoicism teaches us that mental toughness isn't something you're born with, it's something you cultivate through deliberate, consistent effort. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, famously wrote in his Meditations that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, hardship isn't an obstacle to be avoided. It's the very thing that shapes us into stronger, more capable individuals. Take the story of a young artist who struggled with crippling self-doubt. Every time she picked up a brush, a voice in her head whispered that her work wasn't good enough, that she'd never succeed. Instead of giving in to that voice, she decided to take small, daily steps to prove it wrong. She started by painting for just 5 minutes a day, no matter how she felt. Over time, those 5 minutes turned into hours, and her confidence grew alongside her skill. She didn't silence her self-doubt overnight, but by facing it head-on, she built the resilience to keep going. This is the essence of Stoic wisdom. Resilience isn't about avoiding challenges, it's about meeting them with courage and persistence. So, where in your life can you start practicing resilience this week? Maybe it's in your work, your relationships, or even a personal goal you've been putting off. Identify one area where you can take small, consistent steps forward, even when it feels uncomfortable. Remember, it's not about being fearless, it's about acting despite the fear. Each small act of courage adds up, building the mental toughness you need to thrive. What would happen if you stopped caring about others' opinions? It's a question that might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's also one that holds the key to silencing self-doubt. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that true freedom comes from detaching ourselves from external validation, whether it's praise or criticism. As Epictetus once said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" In other words, don't let the opinions of others define your worth. They only see a fraction of who you are, and their judgments are often rooted in their own biases and limitations. Think about an artist who creates purely for the joy of it, not for applause or recognition. Their work becomes an expression of their inner world, untouched by the need for approval. They don't second-guess themselves because they're not crafting their art to please an audience. They're creating because it's what they love, and that's enough. This is the essence of detachment, focusing on what's within your control and letting go of the rest. Now take a moment to reflect. How much of your self-doubt stems from seeking external validation? Do you find yourself hesitating, not because you lack ability, but because you're afraid of what others might think? The Stoic practice of detachment isn't about becoming indifferent or uncaring. It's about reclaiming your power. When you stop outsourcing your self-worth to others, you start building a foundation of confidence that no one can shake. So, what would change in your life if you stopped letting the opinions of others hold you back? Picture this: you're sitting by a quiet lake, the water perfectly still, reflecting the soft glow of the sunset. There's no noise, no distractions, just you, the gentle breeze, and the sound of your own breath. In that moment, nothing else exists. No worries about tomorrow, no regrets about yesterday. Just the here and now. This is what it means to be fully present, and it's a concept Stoicism holds in high regard. The Stoics believed that the present moment is the only place where we truly have power. The past is gone, the future is uncertain, but right now, this moment is where life happens. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. His words remind us of how fleeting time is and how much we waste by dwelling on what we can't control. Self-doubt thrives when we're stuck in the past or anxious about the future. But when we anchor ourselves in the present, we silence that voice of uncertainty. It's not about ignoring challenges or pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing that the only thing we can truly influence is what we do in this very moment. Take the story of Sarah, a young professional who struggled with overwhelming anxiety. She found herself constantly replaying past mistakes and worrying about future failures. It wasn't until she started practicing mindfulness, focusing on her breath, noticing the sensations in her body, and grounding herself in the present, that she began to feel a sense of calm. By shifting her attention to what was happening right in front of her, she realized how much of her anxiety was tied to things that hadn't even happened yet. Over time, this practice helped her build confidence and quiet the self-doubt that had held her back for so long. So, here's a challenge for you today. Take just 5 minutes to practice mindfulness. It doesn't have to be complicated. Find a quiet spot, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. Notice how the air feels as it enters and leaves your body. If your mind starts to wander, and it will gently bring your attention back to the present. This simple exercise might feel small, but it's a powerful way to train your mind to stay grounded. Over time, you'll find it easier to silence self-doubt by focusing on what's within your control, right here, right now. The present moment is a gift, and the more we learn to live in it, the less power self-doubt has over us. It's not about perfection, it's about practice, and every moment you spend grounded in the now is a step toward a calmer, more confident you. Courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite it. This bold truth lies at the heart of Stoic philosophy. The Stoics didn't see courage as some superhuman trait reserved for heroes. They saw it as a choice, a decision to move forward even when uncertainty and fear try to hold us back. For them, courage was one of the 4 cardinal virtues, essential for living a life of wisdom, justice, and self-mastery. And when it comes to silencing self-doubt, courage is the muscle we need to strengthen. Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, wrote extensively about bravery. He believed that courage isn't about erasing fear, it's about recognizing fear and still choosing to act. Think about it. Self-doubt often whispers that we're not good enough, that we might fail, that others might judge us. But courage steps in and says, so what? What if I fail? What if they judge? I'll still try. That's the Stoic approach. It's not about ignoring the risks, it's about accepting them and deciding they're worth facing. Take a moment to consider someone who's taken a leap of faith despite their doubts. Maybe it's a friend who started a new career later in life, or an artist who shared their work with the world, even though they were terrified of criticism. These are everyday acts of courage, and they remind us that bravery doesn't always look like a grand gesture. Sometimes it's as simple as showing up when every part of you wants to hide. Now think about your own life. What's one fear that's been holding you back? Is it the fear of failure, rejection, or not being good enough? Stoicism teaches us that these fears are natural, but they don't have to define us. The next time self-doubt creeps in, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if I try? And more importantly, what's the cost of not trying? Courage doesn't ask you to be fearless. It asks you to take one step forward, even if your legs feel like they're made of lead. That's how you silence self-doubt, by proving to yourself that you're stronger than the voice that says you can't. So here's a challenge for you. Identify one fear, just one, that you're ready to face head-on. Maybe it's starting that project you've been putting off, having a difficult conversation, or simply asking for help when you need it. Whatever it is, remember, courage isn't about perfection. It's about progress, and every small act of bravery chips away at self-doubt, one step at a time. What are you grateful for, even in moments of doubt? It's a question that might feel challenging when self-doubt creeps in, but it's precisely in those moments that gratitude can become our most powerful tool. Stoicism teaches us that gratitude isn't just a fleeting feeling. It's a deliberate practice, a way to shift our focus from what we lack to what we already have. This mindset doesn't erase our struggles, but it helps us see them in a new light, reminding us that even in hardship, there's always something to appreciate. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." This simple yet profound idea invites us to redirect our attention. Instead of dwelling on what's missing or what's going wrong, we're encouraged to take stock of the good that's already present in our lives. It's not about ignoring difficulties, it's about balancing our perspective so that we don't let those difficulties overshadow everything else. Consider the story of a young artist who, after facing repeated rejections from galleries, began to doubt her talent and worth. At her lowest point, she started a nightly ritual of writing down 3 things she was grateful for. Some days, it was as simple as the warmth of the sun or a kind word from a friend. Over time, this practice didn't just lift her spirits, it gave her the resilience to keep creating. Gratitude became her anchor, helping her see that her value wasn't defined by external validation, but by the small, meaningful moments that filled her life. So, what about you? What 3 things are you grateful for today? It could be something as grand as a supportive community or as simple as a quiet moment to yourself. The act of naming these things, even silently, can be a small but powerful step toward silencing self-doubt. Gratitude doesn't ask us to pretend everything is perfect. It simply asks us to notice the good that's already here. And sometimes that's enough to remind us of our strength and worth. Perfection is a myth that fuels self-doubt. It's a trap many of us fall into, believing that we must be flawless in every aspect of our lives, our work, our relationships, even our hobbies. But here's the truth: perfection doesn't exist. It's an illusion, a moving target that keeps us running in circles, always feeling like we're not enough. Stoicism, however, offers a powerful antidote to this endless chase. Instead of striving for the impossible, Stoic philosophy teaches us to focus on what's within our control and to accept our imperfections as part of being human. Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." What he meant is that our fear of not being perfect, of falling short, is often worse than the reality of our mistakes. When we fixate on perfection, we're not just setting ourselves up for disappointment, we're creating unnecessary suffering. The Stoics remind us that life isn't about being flawless, it's about striving to do our best while embracing our humanity. Take, for example, the story of a young artist who spent years paralyzed by self-doubt, afraid to share her work because it didn't meet her impossibly high standards. She believed that anything less than perfect wasn't worth showing, but when she began to study Stoicism, she realized that her pursuit of perfection was holding her back. She started to let go, to accept that her art was a reflection of her growth, not her flaws. And when she finally shared her work, she discovered something profound. People connected with it not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Her imperfection became her strength. So, where in your life are you holding yourself to impossible standards? Is it at work, where you feel like every task has to be flawless? Or in your relationships, where you think you need to be the perfect partner, friend, or parent? Take a moment to reflect. What would it feel like to let go of that pressure, even just a little? To remind yourself that you're human, and that's more than enough. The Stoics didn't ask us to be perfect. They asked us to be courageous, to face our fears, and to live authentically. And sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is to stop chasing the myth of perfection and start embracing who we truly are. Think about this for a moment. How would you view the situation you're struggling with right now if you looked back on it 10 years from today? Would it still feel as overwhelming, as paralyzing as it does now? This is where Stoic wisdom invites us to pause and zoom out. One of the most powerful tools in the Stoic toolkit is perspective, the ability to step back and see our struggles in the context of something larger. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote, "Many of the anxieties that harass you are unimportant. You exaggerate them by your own thoughts." In other words, the worries that consume us are often far smaller than we make them out to be. They shrink when we view them from a distance, like mountains turning into molehills when seen from high above. Let's bring this idea to life with an example. Imagine someone who's terrified of public speaking. Every time they're asked to present, their self-doubt screams louder than their confidence. But then, they decide to apply this Stoic practice of perspective. They ask themselves, how will I feel about this presentation in 5 years? Will I even remember it? Suddenly, the fear loses its grip. They realize that this moment, as intense as it feels, is just a blip in the grand timeline of their life. By reframing the challenge, they find the courage to step up and deliver their talk. And guess what? They not only survive the experience, but grow stronger because of it. Now, consider your own doubts. What's weighing on you right now? Take a moment to imagine looking back at this moment from the future. How might your perspective shift? Would the things you're doubting yourself about still seem as significant? This isn't about dismissing your feelings. It's about giving yourself the space to see them for what they truly are. When we zoom out, we often find that our doubts are temporary, and the obstacles we face are far more manageable than they appear. So the next time self-doubt creeps in, try this simple yet profound exercise. Step back, breathe, and ask yourself, how will this look in 10 years? You might just find the clarity and calm you've been searching for. It's easy to think that overcoming self-doubt is a journey you have to take alone, but the truth is, we all need support along the way. Stoicism, often seen as a philosophy of self-reliance, actually places great value on the power of community and meaningful connections. The Stoics believed that wisdom grows stronger when it's shared, and that we're not meant to face life's challenges in isolation. Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, once wrote, "Friendship always benefits, love sometimes injures." What he meant was that genuine friendships rooted in mutual respect and encouragement can be a source of strength, helping us see our worth even when we struggle to see it ourselves. Think about it. How often has a kind word from a friend or a mentor helped you push through a moment of doubt? Maybe it was a teacher who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself, or a colleague who reminded you of your strengths when you felt overwhelmed. These moments matter because they show us that self-doubt doesn't have to be battled alone. In fact, one of the most powerful ways to silence that inner critic is to surround yourself with people who reflect back your potential, who remind you of what you're capable of when you forget. Here's an example. Imagine someone who's always struggled with public speaking. They're paralyzed by fear every time they're asked to present, convinced they'll fail. But then they join a supportive group, a community of people who are also working to overcome their fears. Through shared experiences and encouragement, this person begins to see their anxiety not as a permanent flaw, but as something they can work through. Over time, their confidence grows, not because they've magically erased their doubts, but because they've learned to lean on the strength of others. So, here's a challenge for you. Think about someone in your life who's been a source of encouragement for you. Maybe it's a friend, a family member, or even a co-worker. Reach out to them, share what's on your mind, and let them remind you of your strengths. Because sometimes the best way to silence self-doubt is to let someone else's belief in you speak louder than your own fears. After all, Stoicism teaches us that we're stronger together than we are alone. Would you speak to a friend the way you speak to yourself? For many of us, the answer is a resounding no. We're quick to offer encouragement and understanding to others, yet when it comes to ourselves, we're often harsh, critical, and unforgiving. But here's where Stoicism offers a surprising twist. It reminds us that self-compassion isn't just a modern idea, it's a deeply rooted practice in ancient philosophy. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic thinkers, once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." These words aren't just about ambition or discipline, they're about acceptance. They remind us that before we can grow, we must first meet ourselves where we are, with kindness, not judgment. Self-compassion, in the Stoic sense, isn't about indulgence or avoiding responsibility. It's about recognizing our humanity, our imperfections, and treating ourselves with the same patience we'd extend to a friend. Let me share a story that illustrates this beautifully. A young woman, let's call her Sarah, struggled with crippling self-doubt. She was constantly comparing herself to others, convinced she wasn't smart enough or capable enough to succeed. One day, she came across Stoic teachings and decided to try something simple but profound. She began speaking to herself as if she were her own best friend. Instead of berating herself for mistakes, she'd say, "It's okay, you're learning, keep going." Over time, this small shift in how she treated herself changed everything. She began to see her struggles not as failures, but as opportunities to grow. And that's the power of self-compassion. It doesn't erase challenges, but it transforms how we face them. So here's a challenge for you. Take a moment to write down one kind thing you can say to yourself today. It doesn't have to be grand or life-changing, just a simple acknowledgement of your worth, your effort, or your potential. Because here's the truth, the way you speak to yourself becomes the foundation of how you navigate the world. And when you treat yourself with the same care you'd show a friend, you'll find that self-doubt doesn't stand a chance. Confidence comes from preparation, not luck, a truth that Stoicism has long championed. The Stoics believed that self-doubt often stems from feeling unprepared, and the antidote lies in deliberate, consistent effort. Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, once said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that the more we prepare, the less room there is for doubt to take hold. Preparation isn't just about memorizing facts or rehearsing speeches. It's about building a foundation of competence and resilience that allows you to face challenges with clarity and calm. Think about an athlete training for the Olympics. They don't just show up on the day of the event hoping for the best. Their confidence is built through countless hours of practice, failure, and refinement. Each repetition, each moment of preparation, chips away at self-doubt and replaces it with certainty. The same principle applies to everyday life. Whether it's preparing for a big presentation, a difficult conversation, or even just your daily tasks, the act of preparation creates a sense of control that quiets the voice of doubt. So, where in your life could you prepare more effectively? Maybe it's breaking down a daunting project into smaller, manageable steps. Or perhaps it's rehearsing how you'll handle a challenging situation before it arises. Preparation doesn't just reduce uncertainty, it empowers you to act with intention and confidence, even when the stakes feel high. Take a moment to identify one area where you can apply this principle. What small step can you take today to prepare yourself for what lies ahead? By doing so, you're not just following Stoic wisdom, you're building a life grounded in strength and self-assurance. Why do we so often look to others to feel good about ourselves? It's a question that might make you pause, because deep down we all know the truth. Seeking approval from others to feel worthy is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much praise or recognition you pour in, it never feels like enough. Stoicism, though, offers a different path, one that leads us inward to a place of self-reliance and inner validation. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic thinkers, put it this way: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." What he's saying is that your worth isn't something others can give or take away. It's already within you, waiting to be recognized. The key is to stop looking outward and start trusting your own judgment, your own values, and your own sense of purpose. Here's an example to bring this to life. Imagine someone who spent years chasing promotions, accolades, and social media likes, only to feel emptier with every achievement. But then they stumbled upon Stoicism and began to ask themselves, "Why am I letting others define my worth?" Slowly, they started to detach from the need for external validation. They began to measure their success not by what others thought, but by how aligned their actions were with their own principles. And over time, they found a sense of peace they hadn't known before. So, where are you seeking validation outside yourself? Is it in the opinions of co-workers, the approval of friends, or even the number of followers you have online? Take a moment to reflect on that, because here's the thing: when you stop relying on others to validate you, you free yourself from their judgments. You become the author of your own worth, and that's a kind of freedom no amount of external praise can ever match. This isn't about rejecting feedback or living in isolation. It's about shifting the source of your confidence from others to yourself. When you do that, you'll find that the opinions of others lose their grip on you. And that's when you truly start to live on your own terms. Acceptance is the first step to overcoming self-doubt. Stoicism teaches us that resisting reality only amplifies our struggles, while embracing it brings clarity and peace. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it simply: "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." This means focusing on what you can control, your thoughts, actions, and responses, and letting go of what you cannot. It's not about resignation, but about recognizing the boundaries of your influence and redirecting your energy wisely. Think about someone who has faced a major setback, like losing a job they love. At first, they might feel overwhelmed by self-doubt, questioning their worth and abilities. But by practicing acceptance, they begin to see the situation differently. Instead of fighting against what happened, they acknowledge it, learn from it, and focus on what they can do next. This shift in perspective doesn't erase the pain, but it transforms how they carry it, allowing them to move forward with resilience. Now, consider this in your own life. What is one thing you've been resisting or struggling to accept? It could be a personal failure, a challenging relationship, or even an aspect of yourself you're not happy with. Take a moment to reflect on it. Acceptance doesn't mean you have to like it or stop trying to improve. It simply means you stop wasting energy fighting what already is. When you make peace with reality, you free yourself to take meaningful action, and that's where true growth begins. What small step can you take today? This question might seem simple, but it's at the heart of how Stoicism teaches us to approach self-doubt and personal growth. Stoicism doesn't ask for grand, sweeping gestures or overnight transformations. Instead, it values the power of small, consistent actions, the kind that build confidence and resilience over time. As Seneca once said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, it is because we do not dare that they are difficult." Small steps taken consistently are what break down the barriers of self-doubt and open the door to progress. Think about it this way: when you're climbing a mountain, you don't leap to the top in one bound. You take one step at a time, focusing on the path directly in front of you. Each step might feel insignificant in the moment, but together they carry you higher. The same is true for overcoming self-doubt. It's not about erasing it all at once. It's about chipping away at it, one small win at a time. Take the story of Marcus, a young writer who struggled with crippling self-doubt. Instead of trying to write an entire novel in one go, a task that felt impossible, he committed to writing just one paragraph a day. Some days that paragraph flowed easily, other days it felt like pulling teeth. But over time, those small, consistent efforts added up. Each paragraph was a small win, a proof to himself that he could do it, and slowly his confidence grew. That first paragraph turned into a chapter, then into a completed manuscript. None of it would have happened without those initial, seemingly small steps. So, what's your one small step? Maybe it's setting aside 5 minutes to meditate, jotting down one idea for a project, or simply reminding yourself of one thing you're grateful for. The key is to choose something manageable, something you can commit to without feeling overwhelmed. Stoicism reminds us that progress isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. By focusing on small wins, you create a foundation of confidence that grows stronger with each passing day. What small action will you take today to move forward? Humility is the antidote to self-doubt. In a world that often celebrates overconfidence and self-promotion, Stoicism offers a refreshing perspective. Humility isn't weakness, it's strength. By embracing humility, we stop measuring ourselves against impossible standards and instead focus on growth, learning, and the reality of our human limitations. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This strength comes from accepting what we don't know, what we can't control, and where we need to improve. Humility allows us to step back from the noise of comparison and self-criticism, grounding us in the truth of who we are. Think about a time when someone faced a challenge they didn't feel ready for. Maybe they doubted their abilities or feared failure. But instead of letting that doubt paralyze them, they acknowledged their limitations and asked for help. That act of humility didn't make them weak, it made them resilient. It gave them the clarity to see their situation honestly and the courage to take the next step. Humility, in this sense, becomes a tool for empowerment, not a sign of defeat. So, how can humility empower you? Take a moment to reflect on where self-doubt might be holding you back. Are you trying to prove something to others or yourself? What would it feel like to let go of that pressure and simply focus on doing your best, even if it's imperfect? Stoicism reminds us that humility isn't about diminishing ourselves. It's about freeing ourselves from the weight of unrealistic expectations. When we stop pretending we have all the answers, we open the door to real growth and inner peace. And that's where true confidence begins. What are you holding onto that's weighing you down? It's a question worth asking because so often, our self-doubt stems from clinging to things we can't control. Whether it's a past mistake, someone else's opinion, or a future outcome that feels uncertain. Stoicism offers a powerful antidote to this, the practice of letting go. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life." It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And isn't that the truth? When we fixate on what we can't change, we trap ourselves in a cycle of worry and hesitation. But when we learn to release those burdens, we create space for clarity and growth. Consider the story of a young artist who struggled with perfectionism. For years, she held on to every critique, every rejection, letting them define her worth. It wasn't until she stumbled upon Stoic teachings that she realized her fear of failure was rooted in trying to control how others perceived her work. By consciously letting go of that need for external validation, she found the freedom to create for the joy of it, not for approval. Her art flourished not because she became perfect, but because she stopped letting perfectionism hold her back. So, what's one thing you can release today? Maybe it's a grudge you've been carrying, a goal that no longer serves you, or even the expectation that you have to have everything figured out right now. Remember, letting go isn't about giving up, it's about reclaiming your power to focus on what truly matters. And as the Stoics remind us, that power lies in what we choose to hold on to and what we choose to release. Purpose silences self-doubt. It's a simple yet profound truth, and one that Stoicism has championed for centuries. When you align your actions with a greater purpose, the noise of uncertainty begins to fade. Why? Because purpose gives you a compass, a clear direction that helps you navigate life's challenges without being derailed by fear or hesitation. Seneca, one of Stoicism's greatest thinkers, once said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, it is because we do not dare that they are difficult." In other words, when we act with intention and purpose, even the most daunting obstacles become manageable. Think about it this way: self-doubt often thrives in the absence of clarity. When you're unsure of what you're working toward, every decision feels risky, every step forward feels shaky. But when you have a clear sense of purpose, it's like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, you can see the path ahead, and the shadows of doubt no longer loom so large. This is why Stoicism places such a strong emphasis on living with intention, because it's not just about what you do, but why you do it. Take, for example, the story of a young athlete who struggled with self-doubt. She constantly questioned her abilities, wondering if she was good enough to compete at a high level. But when she shifted her focus from proving herself to others to pursuing her love of the sport and the joy it brought her, something changed. Her purpose became clear: to grow, to challenge herself, and to honor her passion. That clarity gave her the confidence to push through setbacks and perform at her best. Her self-doubt didn't disappear overnight, but it no longer controlled her. So, what about you? What's your purpose? Is it tied to your career, your relationships, or a personal passion? The Stoics believed that a life well lived is one aligned with a meaningful purpose, one that resonates deeply with who you are. Take a moment to reflect on what drives you. How does your purpose shape your decisions and actions? When you feel self-doubt creeping in, remind yourself of the bigger picture. Let your purpose be the anchor that keeps you steady, even in the stormiest of times. What if growth takes longer than you expect? It's a question that can stir up self-doubt, especially when we're eager to see results. But Stoicism offers a powerful antidote: patience. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most revered Stoic philosophers, once said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." These words remind us that challenges and delays aren't roadblocks, they're opportunities to strengthen our resolve and build resilience. Think about it: patience isn't just about waiting. It's about staying committed to the process, even when progress feels invisible. Take, for example, the story of Thomas Edison. He failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. Each setback could have been a reason to give up, but instead he saw them as steps toward his goal. His patience and persistence didn't just lead to success, it transformed how we live. This principle applies to us too. When self-doubt creeps in, whispering that you're not moving fast enough, remember that growth often happens in the quiet, unseen moments. It's in the daily effort, the small decisions, and the willingness to keep going even when the finish line feels distant. So, where in your life can you practice more patience? Maybe it's in honing a skill, building a relationship, or working toward a long-term goal. The key is to trust the process and recognize that every step forward, no matter how small, is progress. Stoicism teaches us that patience isn't passive, it's an active choice to align with the natural rhythm of life. By embracing this virtue, we not only silence self-doubt, but also open ourselves to the possibility of deeper, more meaningful growth. Adversity is the teacher of resilience. This idea lies at the heart of Stoic philosophy, which teaches us that challenges are not obstacles to avoid but opportunities to grow. The Stoics believed that hardship is like a forge. It tempers us, strengthens us, and reveals our true character. As Epictetus once said, difficulties are things that show what men are. In other words, it's not the absence of struggle that defines us, but how we respond to it. Consider the story of Thomas Edison, who famously failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. Each setback was not a defeat but a lesson, a chance to refine his approach and push forward. Edison once remarked, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." His mindset reflects a Stoic principle. Adversity is not something to fear or resent, but a tool for building resilience and wisdom. Think about your own life for a moment. What challenges have you faced that seemed insurmountable at the time? How did they shape you? Perhaps a career setback taught you perseverance, or a personal loss revealed your capacity for compassion. The Stoics would argue that these experiences, no matter how painful, are invaluable. They carve out the person you are becoming. So, the next time you encounter a difficulty, try to shift your perspective. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger? By embracing adversity as a teacher, you align yourself with one of the most empowering principles of Stoic wisdom. What can you simplify in your life to reduce self-doubt? This might sound like an unusual question, but Stoicism teaches us that simplicity is a powerful tool for clarity and confidence. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." In other words, when we strip away the unnecessary, whether it's material possessions, overcomplicated goals, or chaotic thoughts, we create space for focus and inner peace. Think about it. When your mind is cluttered with distractions, doubts tend to multiply. But when you simplify your life, you give yourself the gift of clarity. For instance, imagine someone who decides to declutter their workspace. At first, it might seem like a small change, but over time, they notice how much easier it is to focus, make decisions, and trust their instincts. The act of simplifying isn't just about tidying up a room. It's about creating a mental environment where self-doubt struggles to take root. So, what's one area in your life you can simplify today? Maybe it's your schedule, cutting out commitments that drain your energy. Perhaps it's your mindset, letting go of perfectionism and embracing what's good enough. Or it could be as simple as clearing out a drawer or unsubscribing from emails that no longer serve you. Every small step toward simplicity is a step toward silencing self-doubt. Stoicism reminds us that life is richer when we focus on what truly matters. By removing the excess, we uncover the confidence that's been there all along. So take a moment to reflect. What's one thing you can simplify right now to create more space for clarity and courage in your life? Every moment is a choice. That's one of the most powerful truths Stoicism offers us. It's easy to feel like life happens to us, like we're caught in a current we can't control. But Stoicism reminds us that while we can't always control what happens, we can always choose how we respond. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it this way: "You are not your body or your possessions, you are your choices." In other words, the essence of who you are lies not in the circumstances you face, but in the decisions you make about them. Think about it. When self-doubt creeps in, it often feels overwhelming, like a force we can't escape. But the Stoics would argue that doubt only has power over us if we give it permission. Every time we choose to question our worth, to hesitate, or to shrink back, we're making a choice, one that reinforces the doubt. But the opposite is also true. When we choose to act despite the doubt, to question its validity, or to focus on what we can do rather than what we can't, we take back control. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone who's always dreamed of starting a business but is paralyzed by fear of failure. They spend months, maybe even years, stuck in the same cycle of doubt, telling themselves they're not ready, not smart enough, not capable. But then one day they make a different choice. They decide to take one small step, a simple action, like researching their idea or reaching out to a mentor. That single choice, that moment of intentionality, begins to shift everything. With each new decision, the doubt loses its grip. They start to see themselves not as someone defined by fear, but as someone who chooses courage even when it's hard. This is the power of choice. It's not about grand, sweeping gestures. It's about the small, daily decisions that shape who we become. So here's a question to reflect on. What choices are you making right now? Are you choosing to feed your doubts, or are you choosing to act in spite of them? Every day, every moment, you have the power to decide, and that's where your freedom lies. What have you learned from your doubts? It's a question that might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's also one that holds the key to growth. Stoicism teaches us that self-doubt isn't something to fear or avoid. It's an opportunity for reflection, a chance to turn inward and uncover deeper truths about ourselves. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's most renowned thinkers, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that reflection is where we reclaim our power, where we transform doubt into clarity. Take, for example, the story of a young writer who struggled for years with self-doubt. Every time she sat down to write, she was paralyzed by the fear that her work wasn't good enough. But instead of running from that fear, she began to reflect on it. She asked herself, why does this doubt keep showing up? What is it trying to tell me? Over time, she realized that her self-doubt wasn't a sign of failure. It was a signal that she cared deeply about her craft. That realization didn't erase her doubts, but it gave her a new perspective. She began to see them as reminders to stay humble, to keep learning, and to approach her work with curiosity rather than fear. This is the power of reflection. It's not about eliminating self-doubt, it's about understanding it. When we take the time to sit with our doubts, to examine them without judgment, we often find that they carry valuable lessons. Maybe your doubts are pointing out areas where you need to grow. Maybe they're highlighting fears that no longer serve you, or maybe, like the writer, they're simply reminding you of what matters most. So let's take a moment to practice this. Set aside 5 minutes, just 5, to reflect on your recent doubts. What have they taught you? What patterns do you notice? And how might you use those insights to move forward with greater confidence? Remember, this isn't about finding all the answers right away. It's about creating space for self-awareness, for the kind of quiet reflection that Stoics like Marcus Aurelius believed was essential to living a meaningful life. Start small, start now, and see what you discover. Virtue is the foundation of confidence. In Stoicism, living in alignment with virtues like wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance isn't just a suggestion, it's the very essence of a fulfilling life. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once said, "Virtue is nothing else than right reason." What he meant by this is that true strength and clarity come from aligning your actions with what is good, true, and just. When you act virtuously, you're not just doing what's right, you're building an unshakable sense of self-trust. Think about it this way: when you make a decision rooted in courage, like standing up for someone who's being treated unfairly, you're not just helping them. You're also reinforcing your own belief in your ability to do what's right, even when it's hard. Or consider wisdom. When you take the time to reflect before reacting, you're not just avoiding a mistake. You're cultivating a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you. Virtuous actions don't just shape your character, they strengthen your confidence because they remind you of who you are and what you stand for. Take the example of a teacher who chooses to speak up against an unfair policy at their school, even when it's risky. They're acting with courage and justice, two core Stoic virtues. In that moment, they might feel fear, but by choosing to act in alignment with their values, they find a quiet strength that silences self-doubt. Their confidence doesn't come from the outcome of their actions, but from knowing they did what was right. That's the power of virtue. It's a source of inner stability, no matter what happens externally. So, how can you embody Stoic virtues in your own life? Start small. Reflect on a situation where you felt uncertain or hesitant. Ask yourself, what would courage look like here? What would wisdom guide me to do? By taking even one step in the direction of virtue, you're building a foundation of confidence that can carry you through life's challenges. Virtue isn't about being perfect, it's about striving to act with integrity, one decision at a time. And each time you do, you'll find that self-doubt has less room to take hold. Let's bring it all together. Throughout this video, we've explored how Stoic wisdom can help you silence self-doubt by focusing on what's truly within your control. Remember, external circumstances may be unpredictable, but your thoughts, actions, and reactions are yours to shape. Practicing self-awareness is key. Recognize when doubt creeps in and choose to respond with clarity and purpose rather than fear or hesitation. And let's not forget the importance of embracing imperfection. Life is messy, and that's okay. Growth comes from learning, not from being flawless. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's greatest minds, once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. These words remind us that doubt loses its grip when we shift our focus inward to the strength and resilience we already possess. So, what's next for you? Start small. The next time self-doubt whispers in your ear, pause. Ask yourself, is this within my control? Can I choose to respond differently? Each moment is an opportunity to practice these principles and build a life rooted in confidence and peace. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments what's one way you'll apply Stoic wisdom to quiet your self-doubt. And if you're ready for more tools to live a calmer, more intentional life, hit that subscribe button. Together, let's keep exploring the timeless lessons of Stoicism and unlock the strength